Welcome to Storytales. Please like this video and subscribe to Storytales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. The oak board felt smooth under Peter's calloused hands as he ran the plane across its surface. Wood shavings curled away in perfect spirals, falling to the workshop floor. He'd been working on this dining table for 3 weeks now, each stroke bringing him closer to the vision in his mind. His phone buzzed against the workbench. Peter set down the plane and glanced at the screen. Harbor Ridge Elementary School. His stomach tightened. Peter Kendrew. Mr. Kendrew. The voice belonged to a woman, tight with panic. This is Mrs. Patterson from Harbor Ridge Elementary. You need to come to the hospital immediately. Weston collapsed during math class. The words hit him hard, but Peter's voice stayed steady. What happened? He started vomiting. Then he seemed confused, couldn't remember where he was. The paramedics said he had convulsions in the ambulance. Peter was already moving, grabbing his keys. Which hospital? Harbor Ridge General. His mother is meeting you there. The workshop door slammed behind him as he ran to his truck. Harbor Ridge General sat on the edge of town like a concrete monument. The automatic doors swished open. Peter spotted Nadine sitting in one of the plastic chairs, staring at her phone. Where is he? Peter asked. Nadine's face was pale, but her makeup was still perfect. They won't tell me anything. They just said to wait. Peter walked to the reception desk. The woman behind the counter had kind eyes and gray hair. I'm Peter Kendrew. My son Weston was brought in from the elementary school. The doctor will be with you shortly. Please have a seat. I want to see my son. Sir, the medical team is working with him right now. Peter remained standing. Sitting felt like giving up. A doctor in green scrubs pushed through the double doors. His face carried the weight of bad news. Mr. and Mrs. Kendrew, that's us, Peter said. The doctor was young, with tired eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. I'm Dr. Morrison. Please sit down. I'll stand. Tell me about my son. Weston went into cardiac arrest in the ambulance. We were able to resuscitate him, but his organs began failing rapidly. We did everything we could. He paused. I'm very sorry. Weston died at 2:47 p.m. The preliminary cause appears to be acute organ failure. Peter didn't move, didn't breathe. Weston was dead. His 10-year-old son was gone. That's impossible, Peter said. He was healthy. Sometimes these things happen without warning. There could have been an underlying condition. I want to see him. The hospital room was small and sterile. Weston lay on the bed, covered by a white sheet up to his chin. Peter pulled a chair next to the bed and sat down. He reached out and touched his son's hand. Still warm. I'm sorry, buddy. Peter whispered. He stayed for an hour. When he finally walked back to the waiting room, Nadine was gone. The receptionist said she'd left, said she needed some air. Peter drove home alone. 3 days passed in a blur of funeral arrangements. Nadine stayed busy with paperwork. When Peter suggested they wait for the autopsy results, she shook her head. We should accept this and move on, she said. Dwelling on details won't bring him back. Wednesday morning, Dr. Eliza Harrow called. Peter recognized her voice immediately. 3 years ago, when old Sullivan had his heart attack in Peter's driveway, Dr. Harrow had been the one to explain what happened. Peter, I need to see you. Can you come to my office this evening? After hours. What's this about? Weston's autopsy. There's something I need to show you. Harbor Ridge was small enough that the medical examiner's office shared space with the county clerk in a converted Victorian house on Maple Street. Peter arrived at 7 p.m. Dr. Harrow met him at the side door. Thank you for coming, she said. I couldn't discuss this over the phone. She led him to her office. Medical books lined the shelves, and a small desk lamp cast yellow light over scattered papers. Sit down, Peter. Dr. Harrow settled into her chair and pulled out a manila folder. I've been the medical examiner here for 15 years. I've never seen anything like this. Like what? She opened the folder and pulled out a photograph. I found this during Weston's autopsy. Peter took the photo. It showed something small and metallic, about the size of a pill, with tiny wires extending from one end. What is it? I don't know, but it was surgically implanted near his left kidney. Very precise placement, very clean incisions. This wasn't put there by accident. Peter stared at the device. Someone put this in my son recently. The incision site shows signs of healing, but it's fresh. Maybe 2 or 3 weeks old. Why would someone do this? Dr. Harrow leaned back in her chair. That's what I'm hoping you can help me figure out. Has Weston been to any doctors lately? Any procedures? Peter thought back. No. Nadine handles most of the medical stuff, but she would have told me if he needed surgery. Peter, I can't sign off on acute organ failure as the cause of death. Not with this device in his body. I need to know what it is and why it was there. Have you told anyone else about this? No. And I won't until we understand what we're dealing with. Peter drove home with the photograph in his jacket pocket. Someone had violated his son, turned him into some kind of experiment. The house was dark when he pulled into the driveway. Nadine's car was gone. Peter walked straight to Nadine's home office. Her laptop sat on the desk by the window, usually closed but not locked. The laptop screen lit up when he opened it. No password required. Peter clicked through recent files. Work documents from Lanix Pharmaceuticals, email drafts, shopping lists. Nothing connected to Weston's medical care. But there, buried in a folder marked Personal, he found something that made his blood freeze, a file named Subject 9X, Weston K. Peter opened the file with fingers that had gone numb. The document looked like a medical report, dense with technical language and measurements that read like a science experiment. Subject 9X demonstrates improved cognitive processing in preliminary tests. Reaction time decreased by 12% over baseline. Memory retention showing marginal improvement. Recommend increasing dosage to 15 milligrams weekly. Side effects noted: mild nausea, difficulty sleeping, occasional stomach pain. Subject reports feeling different, but cannot articulate specifics. Monitoring device shows elevated stress markers during school hours. Note: subject unaware of trial participation. Cover story of vitamin supplements maintaining effectiveness. Peter read the document 3 times before the words registered. Someone had been giving Weston drugs without his knowledge. Someone had been testing him, monitoring him, treating him like a lab animal. Peter scrolled through more files. Photos of Weston at different ages, medical measurements, behavioral observations. Brain activity patterns. Detailed notes about eating habits, sleep patterns, academic performance. At the bottom of the folder, Peter found a text message thread between Nadine and someone named Roan. Roan, how did he react to yesterday's dose? Nadine, he complained about his stomach again. Asked me why the vitamins made him feel weird. Roan, that's normal. The cognitive enhancement comes with temporary side effects. He'll adapt. Nadine, what if Peter notices something? Roan, he won't. You're giving them at breakfast when he's at work. Just keep following the schedule. Peter scrolled down through weeks of messages. Near the end, the tone changed. Roan, the readings from his device are concerning. His stress levels are spiking. Nadine, he's been quiet lately, staying in his room more. Roan, I had to increase the dose. He reacted poorly. Don't panic. We'll handle it. Nadine, what do you mean, reacted poorly? Roan, his body is rejecting the enhancement compound. We need to adjust the formula. Nadine, is he in danger? Roan, there's always risk with breakthrough research. That's why the compensation is so generous. The final message was dated 2 days before Weston died. Roan, if something happens, we stick to the story. Acute organ failure, underlying condition, bad luck. You get your payout either way. Peter closed the laptop and sat in the dark office. His wife had been poisoning their son for money. She'd turned Weston into a test subject, and when it killed him, her first concern was covering it up. Headlights swept across the front yard. Nadine's car pulled into the driveway. Peter heard the front door open, heard her keys hit the bowl on the kitchen counter. Her footsteps moved through the house, up the stairs to their bedroom. The shower started running. Peter searched through her things. In the back of her closet, behind shoes she never wore, he found a small cardboard box. Inside was a burner phone he'd never seen before. The message history showed months of communication with Romatics. Peter scrolled through conversation after conversation about dosages, payments, and cover stories. Roan, are you sure he doesn't suspect anything? Nadine, Peter's not that observant. He spends all day in his workshop, comes home tired. As long as I handle the medical stuff, he doesn't ask questions. Roan, good. The trial needs to run for 6 more months to generate useful data. Nadine, what happens after that? Roan, you get your promotion. I get my research published. Weston gets cognitive advantages that will benefit him for life. Nadine, and if Peter finds out? Roan, he won't. But if he does, you can always leave. I told you I'd take care of you. Peter read that last line 3 times. His wife hadn't just been experimenting on their son for money. She'd been planning to leave him. The shower stopped. Peter put the phone back and returned to the bedroom. When Nadine came out of her robe, he was sitting on the bed. How was your sister's? He asked. Fine. We talked about the memorial service arrangements. She sat at her vanity and started brushing her hair. Did you eat dinner? Wasn't hungry. In the mirror, Peter saw Nadine studying his face. You need to take care of yourself, Peter. Weston wouldn't want you to stop eating, right? Weston wouldn't want a lot of things. Nadine stopped brushing and turned around. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. I'm going to sleep in the workshop tonight. I have work to finish. Peter stood up and walked toward the door. Behind him, Nadine called his name, but he didn't turn around. Peter didn't sleep. He sat in his workshop until dawn, holding the photograph Dr. Harrow had given him and thinking about everything he'd discovered. Dr. Harrow's office opened at 8. Peter was waiting in the parking lot when she arrived. You look terrible, she said, unlocking the side door. Did you find anything? Peter followed her inside and pulled out his phone. He showed her the screenshots he'd taken from Nadine's laptop, the medical reports, the messages, the payments. Dr. Harrow read through everything twice. Roan Maddox, she said finally. I know that name. From where? He works at Lanix Pharmaceuticals. Worked there when I did, about 5 years ago. She set down the phone and looked at Peter. He was part of the reason I left. What do you mean? Dr. Harrow walked to her coffee maker and started a fresh pot. Lanix does legitimate research, diabetes medications, blood pressure drugs. But they also have a side business in cognitive enhancement. Nootropics, smart drugs. And Maddox works on that. He heads the cognitive research division. Very ambitious. Very willing to push ethical boundaries. She paused while the coffee brewed. 5 years ago, he proposed using children of company employees in trials for a new cognitive enhancement compound. Said it would be easier to get consent from parents who understood the science. What happened? The ethics board shot it down. Too risky, too many variables with developing brains. Maddox was furious. He argued that we were being too conservative, that other countries were making advances while we worried about paperwork. Peter felt his hands clenching, so he decided to do it anyway. Without the ethics board, without informed consent. It looks that way. Dr. Harrow poured coffee into 2 mugs. The device we found in Weston, that's definitely a monitoring system. It would track heart rate, blood pressure, neural activity, stress hormones. Real-time data about how the drugs were affecting him. And Nadine knew all this. Based on those messages, she was a willing participant. Peter drank his coffee and tried to think clearly. The evidence was damning, but it was stolen. None of it would hold up in court. But Peter wasn't thinking about court. What would happen if this came out publicly, he asked. Lanix would face federal charges. Unauthorized human experimentation, especially on children, carries serious penalties. Maddox would lose his medical license, probably go to prison. Nadine would face charges too, and Weston would still be dead. Dr. Harrow nodded. I'm sorry, Peter. I know this doesn't bring him back. Peter stood up and walked to the window. Outside, Harbor Ridge was waking up, people driving to work, kids walking to school, normal life continuing. I need you to do something for me, Peter said. What? Keep the autopsy results quiet for a few more days. Don't file anything official yet. Peter, I have legal obligations. Just a few days, until I figure out how to handle this. Dr. Harrow studied his face. What are you planning? Nothing illegal, but I want them to think they got away with it. For now. She was quiet for a long moment. I could delay the final report for a week, maybe 2. That's all I need. Peter drove straight to Dean Cutler's hardware store. Dean had owned Harbor Ridge Hardware for 8 years, ever since he'd left the Army and decided he was done taking orders from people in suits. Peter found Dean in the back office, wrestling with a computer that looked like it belonged in a museum. "I need your help with something." Dean glanced at Peter and immediately pushed back from the computer. They'd known each other for 12 years, served 2 tours together in Iraq. Dean could read Peter's moods better than anyone. "What kind of help?" Peter pulled out his phone and showed Dean the messages between Nadine and Rowan Maddox. Dean read through them slowly, his expression hardening. "They were experimenting on Weston," Dean said. "It wasn't a question. For months. Giving him drugs, monitoring him with some kind of implanted device. When it killed him, they covered it up." Dean set down the phone and leaned back in his chair. "What do you want to do about it?" "I want to know everything about Lennox Pharmaceuticals and Rowan Maddox." "That's going to take some work. I'll pay whatever it costs." Dean nodded slowly. "This isn't about money, Pete, but it's going to be dangerous." "I know. Give me 3 days. Maybe 4. Dean grabbed a notebook. "In the meantime, you need to act normal. Don't let Nadine know you suspect anything." Peter drove home, thinking about going back to the woman who'd poisoned his son for money. That evening, Peter learned more details as he dug deeper into Nadine's files. Weston had been getting injections from Nadine, disguised as nutrient shots for focus. They were prototype neuroenhancers. The device found in him was a sensor node, transmitting internal biometrics to Lennox's data servers. Nadine had enrolled Weston in the trial without his consent in exchange for $150,000 under the table and a promotion. Peter found bank statements showing the payments, the exact amount Rowan had promised. The next morning, Peter waited until Nadine came downstairs for breakfast. She moved through her routine coffee, toast, checking her phone for messages. "We need to talk," Peter said. Nadine looked up from her phone. "About what?" "About what you've been doing to Weston." Something flickered in her eyes, fear, quickly replaced by confusion. "I don't understand." Peter pulled out printouts of the messages between her and Rowan. Nutrient shots, cognitive enhancement, monitoring devices, $150,000 in payments. The color drained from her face. She set down her coffee cup with shaking hands. "Peter, I can explain." "Explain what?" "How you agreed to use our son as a test subject. How you poisoned him for money. How you watched him die and called it bad luck." Nadine's hands were trembling. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. The drugs were safe. Rowan promised they were safe." "Safe for who?" "Safe for the pharmaceutical company that paid you to experiment on children. You don't understand the research we're doing. The potential benefits for Weston's future." "Weston doesn't have a future. He's dead because you sold him to your boyfriend." Tears started running down Nadine's cheeks. "It's not what you think. I think you've been having an affair with a man who experiments on children. I think you enrolled our son in illegal drug trials without telling him or me. I think you planned to leave me for someone who convinced you that Weston's death was acceptable collateral damage." "Peter, please. You did this for money and a promotion. You turned our son into a lab rat." Nadine tried deflection, blaming Peter for being emotionally absent, insisting she did it for Weston's future. Peter didn't raise his voice. He said nothing, just stood up and walked out of the kitchen. He left her crying at the breakfast table. That afternoon, Dean called with updates. His contact in Portland, an ex-NSA intelligence specialist, had been digging into Lennox Pharmaceuticals. "Your friend works fast," Peter said when he arrived at the hardware store. "Jake doesn't mess around. Here's what we found." Dean spread documents across his desk. Lennox has been running unauthorized trials on children for 2 years. At least 12 kids in the Portland area have been part of Maddox's experiments. Are they still alive? Most of them, but several have had serious health problems. Seizures, organ damage, behavioral changes. Peter studied medical reports showing children who'd suffered adverse reactions to the same drugs that killed Weston. "There's more," Dean said. Jake managed to bribe a tech from Lennox to extract internal communications. Dean handed Peter a printed email from r.maddox@lennox.com to and.richards@lennox.com subject. "Protocol adjustment if he dies. We say it was a latent disorder. Move on. Get clean. You'll still get your payout. The research is too important to stop now." Peter read the email twice. They've been planning Weston's cover story before he even died. "I want to kill him," Peter said quietly. "I know. but we're going to do something better. We're going to destroy everything he's built. Dean's contact had one more piece of information that changed everything. Jake thinks we can get the actual data from the monitoring device, Dean said. The one they found in Weston's body. What kind of data? Everything the device recorded while it was inside him. Audio, biometric data, maybe even video if they were using advanced surveillance technology. Peter felt something cold settle in his chest. You're saying we might have recordings of what they did to him. It's possible, but we need to get the device to someone who can reverse engineer the data storage. The next day, Peter took the device from Weston's body to a friend in Portland, a military engineer named Tom Rodriguez, who specialized in electronic surveillance systems. Tom had served with Peter in Iraq and knew how to extract information from damaged equipment. This is sophisticated, Tom said, examining the device under a magnifying lens. Biomedical monitoring, wireless transmission, and what looks like onboard data storage. Can you get the data out? Give me 2 days. Peter waited. When Tom called, his voice was grim. Pete, you need to come see this in person. And bring your friend Dean. You're going to want witnesses. Peter and Dean drove to Tom's workshop in Portland. Tom had connected the device to a computer system that filled half his garage. I was able to recover about 3 months of stored data, Tom said. Audio recordings, biometric measurements, and some video footage from what appears to be a micro camera. Tom clicked play on his computer. Peter heard his own voice first, distant and muffled. How was school today, buddy? Then Weston's voice, clear and heartbreaking. It was okay, Dad. My stomach hurts again. That was recorded 6 weeks before he died, Tom said quietly. The next recording was different. Nadine's voice, close to the microphone. Here's your vitamin shot, sweetheart. This will help you focus better in school. Weston's voice, smaller now. Mom, these vitamins make me feel weird. Like my brain is leaking. That's just your brain getting stronger, honey. It'll stop soon. Peter closed his eyes and listened to his son's voice describing the drugs that were killing him. Weston had been trying to tell them something was wrong, but Nadine had convinced him it was normal. There's more, Tom said. Recordings of phone conversations between your wife and someone named Roan. The next audio file was devastating. Roan's voice instructing Nadine on dosing over the phone. Increased to 20 milligrams this week. His stress markers are elevated, but that's expected during the adjustment phase. Nadine's voice. He's been having nightmares. And he asked me yesterday why the vitamins taste like medicine. Roan, tell him they're a new formula. Children adapt quickly to cognitive enhancement if we maintain consistent dosing. Peter listened to dozens of recordings conversations about his son like he was a piece of laboratory equipment. Discussions of side effects like they were minor inconveniences, plans for adjusting dosages when Weston's body started rejecting the drugs. This is everything we need, Dean said. Audio proof of the unauthorized experiments, evidence of the cover-up, recordings of them discussing Weston's suffering like it was data. Peter stared at the computer screen, showing waveforms of his dead son's voice. Copy everything. Every file, every recording, every piece of data. What's the plan? Tom asked. We're going to make sure everyone knows what they did to him. Peter decided to start with a surgical strike. Instead of going to law enforcement immediately, he wanted to watch Roan and Nadine panic as their world collapsed around them. Dean's contact, Jake, had found an independent biotech ethics blog called Medical Truth that specialized in exposing pharmaceutical fraud. The blogger, Dr. Sarah Chan, was a former FDA investigator who'd built a reputation for breaking stories about corporate misconduct. Peter sent her the first part of the data anonymously, the recordings of Nadine giving Weston injections, his complaints about feeling sick, and emails between Nadine and Roan discussing the cover-up. The story broke on a Tuesday morning. Pharmaceutical company accused of secret experiments on children, ran as the headline, with audio clips of Weston's voice describing how the vitamins made his brain feel like it was leaking. The story caught fire immediately. Other medical ethics websites picked it up, then local news stations, then national outlets. By noon, Lanix Pharmaceuticals was trending on social media. Lanix issued a weak denial. We categorically deny any unauthorized research activities. Our protocols meet or exceed all federal safety standards. But the recordings spoke for themselves. News outlets played clips of Weston's voice, of Nadine discussing dosages, of Roan planning the cover-up. The public reaction was immediate and furious. Peter watched from his workshop as news vans gathered outside Lennox's headquarters. Reporters tried to interview employees as they left the building. Stock prices plummeted. Nadine was pulled into meetings at Lennox. She came home that evening looking shaken. "There's been a security breach at work," she told Peter. "Someone leaked confidential research data." "What kind of data?" "Audio recordings, internal communications. The company is conducting a full investigation." Peter nodded sympathetically. "Sounds serious." "It is. Roan thinks it might be corporate espionage. A competitor trying to damage our research." That night, Peter got a text from Dean. "Roan's panicking. Jake intercepted his communications. He's trying to destroy evidence and planning to blame everything on rogue employees." Peter smiled grimly. "Let them panic. Let them scramble to cover their tracks and point fingers at each other." He wasn't done yet. The next morning, Peter packed a bag and left town for a week. He told Nadine he needed space to grieve, needed time away from reminders of Weston. She seemed relieved to have him gone. Peter drove to a cabin Dean owned in the Oregon mountains and waited. He monitored news coverage of the Lennox scandal, watched the company's stock price continue falling, and planned his next move. After a week of letting Roan and Nadine sweat, wondering who had leaked the recordings and how much evidence existed, Peter was ready for the final phase that he drove back to Harbor Ridge and called Dean. "Time to finish this." Peter said that Dean's intelligence contact, Jake, had been busy during Peter's week away. He'd located Lennox's rural testing site, a converted warehouse 15 miles outside Portland, where they conducted their most sensitive research. "This is where they keep the backup data," Jake explained, showing Peter's satellite photos of the facility. "Everything that's not stored at their main headquarters gets archived here. Financial records, experimental data, communications between researchers. Security? Minimal. 2 guards, basic alarm system, no federal oversight, because officially this facility doesn't exist." Peter studied the building schematics Jake had obtained. The underground data vault was accessible through a service tunnel that connected to the building's mechanical systems. "How do we get in?" Dean knows the area from his Army training. "There's an old logging road that leads to the back of the property. We can approach on foot after midnight when the guard shift changes." 3 days later, Peter and Dean drove toward the testing site in Dean's truck, the bed loaded with tools and equipment. They parked 2 miles away and hiked through dense forest to reach the facility. The building looked like any other industrial warehouse: concrete walls, metal roof, loading dock for trucks. But the extensive security cameras and razor wire fencing revealed its true purpose. "There," Dean whispered, pointing to a utility access point near the rear of the building. "That should connect to the underground systems." They moved carefully, avoiding the security cameras Jake had mapped for them. Dean cut through the fence while Peter kept watch. The utility access led to a tunnel that ran beneath the building. "Data vault should be directly above us," Dean said, checking his blueprints with a small flashlight. They found the access panel. Jake had identified a maintenance hatch that led directly into the underground storage facility. Peter climbed up first, emerging into a room filled with servers and computer equipment. "This is it," Peter said quietly. The data vault contained everything: backup drives, server arrays, filing cabinets full of printed documents. Peter could see labels indicating research data going back 5 years. All of Maddox's illegal experiments, all the evidence of children being harmed, all the financial records showing payments to parents. Dean handed Peter a device that looked like a small metal cylinder. "Thermite charge. This will burn hot enough to melt everything in this room." Peter set the device among the server arrays and activated the timer. They had 15 minutes to get clear of the building. They retraced their path through the tunnel and back to the forest. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the underground data vault exploded in a flash of white-hot light. The thermite burned at 4,000 degrees, melting steel and silicon into slag. By morning, all of Lennox's backup data was destroyed. But Peter wasn't finished. That afternoon, he released everything. The complete audio recordings from Weston's device. Video footage of Nadine giving him injections. Email communications between Roan and Nadine discussing Weston's poor reaction to the drugs. Financial records showing payments to parents. Medical data on all the children who'd been harmed. Peter sent the files simultaneously to the FBI, the FDA, the Oregon State Police, and 50 news organizations across the country. He also sent copies to the parents of every child who'd been part of Maddox's experiments. The story exploded across every media platform. Network news led with audio of Weston saying his brain felt like it was leaking, while his mother assured him it was normal. The recordings of Roan and Nadine planning their cover story played on loop. Pharmaceutical conspiracy exposed. Secret experiments killed child. Ran as the headline on every major newspaper. Within hours, federal agents raided Lennox's headquarters. Harbor Ridge had never seen anything like it. News vans lined Main Street. Reporters interviewed anyone who'd known the Kendrew family. Camera crews filmed the elementary school where Weston had collapsed. Peter watched from his workshop as the town exploded with media attention. Every channel was covering the story of the pharmaceutical company that had experimented on children and the father who'd exposed them. By noon, Roan Maddox had been arrested at his home. The FBI charged him with conspiracy to commit fraud, unauthorized human experimentation, and violation of federal medical research regulations. Lennox's stock price crashed, losing 80% of its value in a single day. Several other Lennox executives were federally indicted. The company's research division was shut down pending investigation. Federal authorities began reviewing every study Lennox had conducted over the past 5 years. Nadine was fired from Lennox that afternoon. Federal agents arrested her at her sister's house, where she'd been hiding since the story broke. She was charged with involuntary manslaughter, child endangerment, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The media coverage was relentless. Photos of Weston appeared on every news website. Audio clips of his voice played on radio stations across the country. The story had everything: corporate conspiracy, betrayed trust, an innocent child killed by the adults who should have protected him. That evening, Peter's phone rang. The caller ID showed Nadine's number. He answered on the third ring. "You destroyed my life," Nadine said. Her voice was hollow, defeated. Peter was quiet for a moment, thinking about Weston's voice on those recordings, asking why the vitamins made him feel sick. "You wanted a better one," he said. He hung up. The phone didn't ring again. 3 weeks later, Peter sat in the office of Catherine Morrison, one of Portland's most prominent medical malpractice attorneys. Morrison specialized in pharmaceutical litigation and had built her reputation taking on companies that put profits ahead of patient safety. "This is the strongest case I've seen in 20 years, Morrison said, reviewing documents spread across her mahogany conference table. "The evidence is overwhelming. The damages are clear, and the defendants have no defense." "What kind of settlement are we looking at?" "We're not settling, Mr. Kendrew. We're going to trial, and we're going to make Lennox pay every penny they owe you." Morrison picked up a legal document. "There's something else you need to know. The consent forms your wife signed for Weston's participation, they're legally invalid." "What do you mean?" "She signed them using her maiden name, Nadine Richards, without your signature or consent. Under federal law, both parents must provide informed consent for any medical research involving minors. Since you were never consulted, the entire trial was unauthorized." Peter felt grim satisfaction. Nadine's attempt to hide her involvement had created the legal opening they needed. What does that mean for the lawsuit? It means Lennox can't claim they had proper consent. Every procedure they performed on Weston was assault and battery. Their insurance won't cover liability because they knowingly violated federal regulations. Morrison ran numbers on her calculator. Loss of life, pain and suffering, medical expenses, punitive damages for willful misconduct. We're looking at a judgment of $15 to $20 million. Can Lennox pay that? Probably not. This lawsuit will likely bankrupt them, but we can attach their assets and force liquidation. Peter thought about the other children who'd been hurt. What about the other victims? We're coordinating with attorneys representing 11 other families. Your case will establish precedent for the others. Lennox is facing total liability exceeding $100 million. 2 months later, the case went to trial. Peter testified about finding the device in Weston's body, discovering the secret files on Nadine's computer, learning about the unauthorized experiments. The jury heard recordings of Weston's voice, describing his symptoms while Nadine assured him everything was normal. The trial lasted 6 days. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. They awarded Peter $22 million in damages. Within a week, Lennox Pharmaceuticals filed for bankruptcy. Peter donated the entire settlement to establish the Weston Foundation, dedicated to whistleblower support and child medical ethics cases. The foundation would help other parents whose children had been harmed by unauthorized medical research. 6 months after the trial ended, Peter drove to Dean's cabin in the Oregon mountains. He brought with him a cardboard box containing the last of Weston's belongings: clothes, toys, school projects, everything that remained of his son's 10 years of life. The cabin sat beside a small lake surrounded by pine trees. Peter built a fire in the stone pit behind the cabin and began burning Weston's things one by one. Each item held memories: the baseball glove from Little League, the rock collection from family camping trips, the science textbooks Weston had read beyond his grade level. Peter saved one item for last: a drawing Weston had made 3 months before he died, showing the two of them building a treehouse in their backyard. Weston had drawn himself handing tools to his father while they worked together on the platform. "We never got to build that treehouse, buddy," Peter said quietly. He folded the drawing carefully and put it in his jacket pocket. Everything else went into the fire. Peter drove back to Harbor Ridge as the sun set behind the mountains. The town looked the same, but felt different now. People nodded to him on the street, spoke to him with respect tinged with sympathy. He was the man who'd brought down a pharmaceutical company, the father who'd fought for his dead son. Back in his workshop, Peter began work on a new project. A bench design he'd been thinking about since the trial ended: simple lines, perfect joints, the kind of furniture that would last generations. He carved a small inscription on the back: the Sentinel. The bench was for Weston, a way of remembering him that had nothing to do with medical experiments or corporate conspiracies. Just a father's love for his son, expressed in wood and craftsmanship. Peter framed Weston's drawing and hung it on the workshop wall where he could see it while he worked. The treehouse they'd never built together, the future that had been stolen from both of them. But Weston's death had meaning now. Federal regulations had been changed to prevent unauthorized research on children. Dozens of families had received compensation for their children's suffering. A pharmaceutical company that treated kids like lab animals had been destroyed. Peter ran his hand along the smooth surface of the bench and thought about his son's voice on those recordings, asking questions about how things worked, trying to understand why the adults in his life were making him sick. "They treated him like a lab rat," Peter said to the empty workshop. "I made sure they'd never forget who he really was."